Hey, what's up, everybody? Of course, welcome to another edition of the Victorious Ones podcast, a place where gaming meets comics, meets sports, meets movies, as well as inspiration. Of course, I'm your host, King Von Jr. You can follow me on social media on Twitter/X at 301 King Von Jr. You can follow the show's Twitter page at Victory Pod One. I'm also on Instagram at Mr. King Von Jr. You can follow the show's Instagram page at Victorious Ones Podcast. I'm also the social media producer for Perfect Plex Talk Radio. Of course, which takes place on Mondays at 6 p.m. hosted by a friend of the program, Mike Knox. And so, with that being said, as you all know, NFL Week One has officially wrapped up. So football season is officially underway. And so before I even get started when it comes to the wrestling, I'm going to dive into some football news, some scores, and so I'm just going to give a recap, like I usually do when the season comes, and then I'm going to dive into the weekend wrestling, especially with the bombshell return, that took place on Friday night. So now, without further ado, excuse me. So as far as week one, it's in the wraps. So week one of the NFL season started. Of course with Thursday night football. With that being said, like I said, Thursday night football. Of course, the Philadelphia Eagles defeated the Dallas Cowboys 24-20. I was actually a little bit surprised that the Cowboys look better than I thought they would. You might want to call this game, Spitgate, if you will. With the gross, way that it opened. As far as that, with Dak Prescott, Jalen Carter from the Eagles getting into it. Um, so as far as that, sorry, slows down. So of course, of course the Eagles. Of course, their player, end up getting suspended for one game. I'm like, come on now. You know what I mean? Yeah, so like I said, Jalen Carter suspended for one game after spitting this, and then like, why does it have to, why does it have to, come down to something like that? Completely uncalled for. But other than that, like I said, the Cowboys, were more impressive than I thought they would be. But in the end, of course, the Eagles being the Eagles, and end up getting the win. Like I said, 24-20. And so on Friday, of course, the game that took place on YouTube, we had the Kansas City Chiefs versus Los Angeles Chargers, and the Chargers, in the upset, ended up defeating the Chiefs 27-21. So I guess since last season, the NFL started to have games that take place back to back on Thursday and Friday, and so, yeah, but of course, as far as Sunday, when it comes to Sunday games, the Colts destroyed the Dolphins 33-8. The Steelers defeated the Jets 34-32. That was an Aaron Rodgers revenge game, and then we have the Jaguars defeat the Panthers 26-10. The Cardinals defeat the Saints 20-13. The Commanders defeat the Giants 21-6. The Buccaneers defeat the Falcons 23-20. The Bengals defeat the Browns by 1 point, 17-16. Raiders defeat the Patriots 20-13. The Niners defeat the Seahawks 17-13. The Broncos defeat the Titans 20-12. Packers defeat the Lions, destroy them 27-13. And Micah Parsons' debut game. You know what I mean? So it's just like never miss a step at all. You know what I mean? He was just all over. Like I said, all over Detroit's offense. Did not let Jared Goff breathe at all. You know what I mean? And if anything, he just pretty much had Jared Goff hemmed up. And so I was like, man, he definitely playing with the edge on his shoulder, the chip on his shoulder, if you will. Looking at the premier edge rusher of the league, moved on to greener pastures. And so as far as that's concerned, then we have the Rams defeat the Texans 14-9. Congratulations to Matthew Stafford for reaching 60,000 career passing yards. Uh, of course, one of many, especially with the modern era of passing. He's reached elite company with the likes of Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Brett Favre, Drew Brees, Dan Marino. As far as that's concerned, and I was like, yeah, that's definitely it's definitely a milestone. So congratulations to him. I will say the game of the week, the game that has raised the bar, will be the Ravens versus the Bills. So the Buffalo Bills defeat the Baltimore Ravens in a comeback, 41-40. And when I say that Josh Allen proved that he is him, that MVP award was not a fluke. He proved that on Sunday night. In that first touchdown that he threw, had some anger behind that thing. You know what I mean? But also, I see the Ravens put a great fight, especially when it came to the running game. You know what I mean? With the way, with the way that Derrick Henry was running, I was like, yeah, this is definitely top 2 or 3 premier running backs all across the league. You know what I mean? Really top 2, along with Saquon. And I've seen him certainly prove that in a typical game. I've seen Lamar being Lamar. But in the end, I've seen the Ravens and having unbelievable collapse, and the Bills just took advantage of that. And had the ultimate comeback where they won 41-40. And so as far as that. And then, of course, on Monday Night Football, the Vikings defeat the Bears 27-24. So that's the recap of Week 1 in the NFL. And so, as a matter of fact, I'm going to go into, go into the rundown of this game, especially when it comes to the Bills and Ravens. I definitely got to go into the stats for this one. Josh Allen went 33 for 46 for 394 yards, 2 touchdowns. Lamar Jackson, 14 of 19 for 209 yards, and 2 touchdowns as well. And James Cook had 13 carries for 44 yards and a touchdown. Derrick Henry by far outplayed him, 18 carries for 169 yards, 2 touchdowns. So as far as I'm concerned, Derrick Henry carried much of that offense. As far as receiving, Keon Coleman had 8 receptions for 112 yards, 1 touchdown. Zay Flowers had 7 receptions, 443 yards, and 1 touchdown. So if anything, that's like I said, that's the recap of Week 1 of the NFL. And I would say that Bills versus Ravens was the game of the week, and it definitely raised the bar for the rest of the season moving forward. Now, next up is time for my SmackDown overview, review. And of course, John Cena made his final appearance in Chicago on his Last Time Is Now farewell tour. So, of course, John Cena's final episode. It was also just Cena's final episode as well. Anyway, Cena's final episode of SmackDown, is definitely shaping up to be an all-timer, as well known. But then there was a familiar entrance music that that hit the speakers, none other than since Cena is Superman, Doomsday arrives. Brock Lesnar made his return on Friday by laying out both John Cena and Sami Zayn during the match. And then Lesnar later confirmed that he and Cena will square off at WrestlePalooza in Indianapolis. So there's your main event officially confirmed. Cena versus Lesnar has been confirmed for WrestlePalooza. So so if anything, that's gonna that of course that's gonna get the Lesnar matchup out the way. So if anything, that they're getting this out the way before Survivor Series. Whatever. I am at just leaves them with the question of who Cena's Survivor Series opponent is going to be. And so yeah, like I said, his send off was spoiled by Lesnar as his match with Sami Zayn ended in a no contest. And so as we saw that Brock Lesnar dragged out of course John Cena hit an avalanche attitude adjustment. As we all know, of course the top rope attitude adjustment before Brock's music hit, and so of course Brock dragged the referee out of the ring before he hit Sami Zayn, and John Cena both at F5, and then of course Lesnar left the ring, laughing. Then when they came back from the commercial, Brock was backstage. Brock was backstage saying, "Hey John, I'll see you at WrestlePalooza." But the biggest headline of SmackDown was none other than the return of the one and only AJ Lee. After 10 years, a 10-year hiatus, AJ made her return. And she still looks great. It's like, she had not aged at all within 10 years. Like, it looks the exact same. The more things change, the more they stay the same. In an AJ situation, it definitely stayed the same. And I was like, man, and it was definitely a breath of fresh air. And with the way that Becky, had disrespected CM Punk and slapped him repeatedly, on Monday Night Raw, and just knew it was only a matter of time, that it was pointing out the obvious that AJ was going to make a return, and sure enough, she did, and so it was met with mostly positive reviews, mostly positive reactions, and the thing is that at first I thought it was going to be just for a one-off, as far as like at the tweet with Becky, maybe something else, and just call it quits again. But reportedly, AJ has signed a multi-year deal with WWE, so she's definitely definitely going to be in for the long haul. And the thing about AJ is that she made her abrupt exit because of mainly because of how CM Punk burned so many bridges with WWE, especially with this falling out with Vince, and and unfortunately, AJ just became a casualty of war, and so the thing is, because of that, her name ends up getting ends up having having blood on it as well because of that, and so the best thing for her to do, by saving face, was to just make the exit altogether, like I said, if anything, Punk not only ruined his perception, but ruined her perception as well. So that's the reason why she made her exit, and also because of mental health, which she has also admitted to as well. And the thing about AJ is that since she left, much of her history, her impact pretty much, WWE made sure to erase her footprint, if you will, and the thing is, as I mentioned this on last night's Turnbuckle Talk with Black Wrestling, hosted by Corey and Mimi and Justin. And like I said, of course, on Tuesday nights at 6:35 on Twitter. But the thing is, is that when it comes to AJ, she gets kind of, her footprint gets kind of lost in the shuffle. And because of the fact that, she was a standout during, during that whole Divas era and every Total Divas and all that type of stuff. And oftentimes AJ doesn't really get the credit that she deserves for, for spearheading this women's revolution. It just so happened that, that of course initially was kicking off on NXT while she was on the main roster. But then, of course, but the thing is, they ended up making their main roster, arrivals, like as she was making her exit. So because of that, AJ wasn't able to, enjoy the fruits of her labor, if you will, and really see, like the vision that she had spearheaded, to see that come to fruition. She didn't really get a chance to see that come to pass. And so there's a lot of opportunities that were missed out, a lot of matchups that were missed out on, and like I said, because of petty backstage BS that happened between Vince and Punk, and and all that stuff. You know what I mean? And like I said, because of that, I'm sorry, like I said, because of that, like I said, AJ had to dissociate, from the company. And the thing is, like during her time, like I said, she made sure to carry that division and to be someone to be taken more seriously, in the midst of an era, like I said, it was dominated by reality TV and Total Divas, the Bella Twins and everything like that. Um, but the thing is, the thing about it was that, was that AJ, when she gave her quote unquote pipe bomb, she read that uh, locker room for filth, and the main ones who you know were rubbed the wrong way were the Bellas themselves. You know what I mean? And that's the reason why that's the reason why that they were yelling over her, um, over her during that promo, and and just loud talking and all this stuff like that. And and like I say, if anything, you know, uh, not only did AJ step on toes, but she broke ankles as well. And so, and like I said, the thing about it is that, like I said, AJ was more than anything, plain and simple, she was ahead of her time, but had not been recognized as being such. So um, because of her exit, she was not able to see, that revolution manifest. And so, so as a result, she never had any interactions, at least until right now, with any of the horsewomen. You know what I mean? So of course we never got to see AJ versus Charlotte, AJ versus Sasha, especially now since Sasha's left the company herself. Now Mercedes at least. AJ versus Bailey. You know what I mean? Let's see, AJ now it's AJ and Becky. At this point, but like I said, we never got to see AJ versus Asuka. Uh, Bianca's on the shelf right now, but eventually I believe that's going to end up happening. You know what I mean? And so, um, like I see, with the way that AJ had to stand, head and shoulders above the rest, both her and Paige. It's pretty much them, Natty, and the rest of the field, if you will. And so, so so if anything, like I said, it's great to see, like I said, AJ finally get her flowers, if not her roses, altogether. And so like I said, it's great, great to see the perception uh, that she got uh, during her comeback. You know, and like I say, I'll tackle that, more on that pretty soon. Um, but like I say, actually, you know what? Yeah, I'll still go into it, especially since we're talking about AJ, and she's the main, sort of, the main uh, topic of discussion tonight. And the thing about it is that, um, you know, and just to, like I said, the thing is, you know, AJ's return is everything that they thought Nikki Bella's return would be. You know what I mean? AJ's return is everything that the company wished Nikki Bella's return could be, but never, you know, you know, never got to be that way. And so, if anything, like seeing AJ's return, definitely had received a much better reception than Nikki's return. Because of the fact that, like, generally speaking, AJ uh, carries more respect. Carries more respect um, than the Bella twins. You know, um, and like I said, the thing is, AJ, does, if anything, like I said, AJ doesn't have that same, perception on her legacy, that the Bellas have, and so, like I said, like I said, the thing is, just naturally, I think more people, more, far more welcoming and more satisfied, myself included, and see as far as seeing AJ's return, and so, also this speaks to, in my estimate, in my belief, more so when you look at the state of the women's division right now, um, and how depleted it really is, and I think that's the big reason why. And the thing is, it's definitely praise bigger opportunities for the other women on the roster. You know what I mean? As far as like like your Stephanie Vaqueras and Julia's and everything like that. Everything like that. And and seeing some of the women in NXT get become more prominent than ever before, like Lash Legend, Jada Parker, and everything like that. But even with that, there's still a void. I'm gonna be honest. Like say, even with like say, like with the way that they're WWE's accelerating the pushes uh, of the women, of the women in the company. If anything, like seeing the way they're accelerating these pushes, it's just that it speaks to a bigger issue in this, especially when it comes to Bianca Belair's absence, right? And I can see more than ever, how Bianca is truly missed on that roster. How her presence leaves a void that is impossible to fill. And this is a point that I mentioned last night on Turnbuckle Talk. And the thing about it is that it's just like the way I see this division, looking, it's like I said, the prospects ain't prospecting right now. It's really not. Doesn't look all that promising. I'm not a pessimistic person, but like you can't replace Bianca's footprint. You can't replace Bianca's imprint on that division. Bianca Belair is one of one, and when she's not there, you can feel it. And this is the first time she has been out for an extended period of time for an injury. You know what I mean? And it's just like the more she's out, the more she's appreciated even more. Like the more you could tell that there's a void. The more she's out, you could definitely feel it in the product. You know what I mean? And and just the match quality, the storylines, and everything like that. It's at this point, it's definitely have to push that the whole Jade and Naomi thing put on the shelf right now. Like I said, especially of course with Naomi being pregnant. But even beyond that, but just when it comes to her and Jade, there's definitely a lot of unfinished business, and and the thing is, I still believe that Naomi, would have, like I said, would have made that name for herself and had the success, whether Bianca was there or not. You know what I mean? And so, like I said, I think that's just something separate. But but the thing about it is that there's others who just ain't really hitting. You know what I mean? And the things, I think that's a big reason why, they push Jade even faster. And the thing is, especially like when you look at the way that that Jade was elevated, and you look at that match with Tiffany Stratton. Let's just say they took the burger off the grill, the steak off the grill a little bit too early. When it comes to Jade, and so of course, eventually she's going to make her rise, but Bianca made her look so much better. Bianca was there to hide her deficiencies. I mean, that's the reason why they put her in that tag team. Now did it, put somewhat of a dent in her, main event single stock? To a certain extent, maybe, but not too much because Bianca's just her. So she was put into this tag team role for the sake of, for the sake of elevating a newcomer and hiding her flaws. So that's the impact that Bianca has had on someone like Jade, right? And so really, that's what it is, and you can definitely tell when it comes to the skill level, like I said, beyond, when you look beyond the surface of just their appearance, and we look at the bells and whistles once that bell rings, the gap is like night and day. You know what I mean? Um, and so, and if anything, like, so, if anything, without Bianca being there, some of Jade's blemishes, will become a little bit more prevalent. And I wish nothing but the best for Jade, but still, like I say, when Bianca's not there, it shows. And I believe that the thing is, when it comes to speaking of Jade's opponent, who she lost to cleanly at SummerSlam, Tiffany Stratton. I believe that if Bianca was there, Tiffy time would have come to an end soon. You know what I mean? And the thing is, Tiffany has run out of dance partners. How she's repeatedly, going toe to toe with Nia, and having a rematch with Jade. And the thing is, the thing about it is, if Bianca was still in the picture, it wouldn't even be a conversation. Tiffy time would have been up. So that's why I say the prospects are not prospecting right now. And that's a big reason why they're relying so much on nostalgia, such as Trish Stratus, AJ, Bella Twins, things like that. Is because of how depleted the roster, the women's division started to become, especially when it comes to injuries. And that's why someone like Trish, who's pushing 50, is still in great shape and still able to go. Because how DDM from Black Wrestling pointed this out as well, is that like I said, the big reason why why Trish can still go, and she's in better shape than Lita, is like saying basically because of not only her being a yoga instructor and stuff like that, but also because of that attitude with this Russian era, it's been less demanding on like I said, it was not as physically demanding on the women's roster at that time as it is now. Whereas the modern day women's division is just nonstop, full speed ahead, go go go. You know what I mean? Green light all the way. Like I said, just nonstop. And the thing about it is that eventually it starts to take a toll. It's already taking a toll. Like I said, when you look at the injuries with like Charlotte, Asuka, Bailey's had an injury. Of course, Mercedes has had a track record of injuries herself. You know what I mean? So of course, like this Bianca's first major injury, hopefully it lasts. You know what I mean? And the thing about it is that because of that, because they put their bodies on the line and give 110%. It definitely eventually catches up to you. And so my concern is that they may in the long run they may not age as well as the likes of Trish. Their bodies may not age as well. Someone like Trish, unless Trish does DDP yoga and really does something to really help these help the current roster of women superstars like Charlotte and and the like. You know what I mean? So like so like I said, when it comes to the state of the women's roster, it's just like it's just so when Bianca's not there, it's just a massive void that is impossible for anyone else to fill. So one more thing, I'll say it like this: for everyone who recognize the void that Charlotte left, when she was gone, who recognize how important Charlotte's presence is on the roster. If people recognize that, I need you to keep the same energy when it comes to Bianca and admit that Bianca not being there has left a massive dent in that division. So yeah, like I said, the thing is not only that, other injuries also, of course, Nia has had double knee replacements herself. You know what I mean? So, like I said, if anything, even though the modern day roster for women's wrestling, set left better quality matches. The thing about it is that the concern is how it would look in the long run, in the long term. You know what I mean? So if anything, that's my whole thing. But yeah, like I say, of course, I say all this. I say all that to say, of course, kudos to AJ Lee making her return. Um, and in other, news, as far as SmackDown, Aleister Black defeated Damian Priest by way of pinfall after hitting him with Black Mass, and Julia defeated Meechin by way of pinfall to retain the women's U.S. title. You know what I mean? So as far as that, that's it. That's it when it comes to when it comes to my SmackDown review. Now, when it comes to Monday Night Raw, that definitely hit on the deeper level as well. So, of course, like I said, SmackDown took place in Chicago, CM Punk's hometown, and of course, Monday Night Raw took place in Milwaukee. And so as far as that, let's see, we definitely see more, like I said, more of AJ and Becky, getting at it as well. And the main focus with this one, also when it came to Jey Uso and LA Knight, their main event, and so as far as that, so of course we had Bronson Reed defeat LA Knight by way of pinfall, and also and also of course we want to talk about AJ Styles as well. Get into that in a minute. But of course, as far as Monday Night Raw, at the top of the show, the Usos announced that they would face Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker at WrestlePalooza after they exchanged words to kick off the show. After the announcement, LA Knight attacked Seth's group division, eventually leading to miscommunication to allow Bronson Reed to splash Jey Uso in the corner. Though LA Knight and Usos ran off the vision, it was Jay and LA argued afterwards. So those bad feelings would continue all throughout the show, with Jay telling his brother Jimmy that he had no interest in having LA Knight's back when he would later face Bronson Reed, later on that night. Then, of course, later on, Jimmy ended up going to LA Knight's locker room, speaking to him, saying he back him, with LA Knight. Of course, said Jimmy was thinking about helping him not to do it. So as far as the main event, we saw Bronson Reed defeat LA Knight, by way of pinfall after the Jagged Edge. Then Braun Breakers, of course, ringside presence allowed Bronson Reed to get the victory. And after the match, Bronson, of course, Braun, the two Brauns, continued to attack on LA Knight until Jimmy Uso ran in, to try and make the save. Yes, Jimmy's attempt for save was cut off, by a Braun Breaker spear. And of course, as Braun attacked, then Jey Uso made his return to save his brother. Then again, like I said, Braun Breaker cut things off with the spear, but before things got out of hand, LA Knight ran off the vision with a chair. And so of course, after Jimmy Uso and LA Knight shook hands, it looked like they looked to bury the hatchet, sell things. Jey Uso out of nowhere speared LA Knight before the show went off the air. And so it's looking, and the thing is, Jay's colors are not as bright as before. Looks like they've gone back to black and red. And I've heard some other people have been saying that Jay could be OTC number 2 since Roman is OTC number 1. You know what I mean? So especially with Solo being out the picture and whatnot. It's certainly that MFT thing, it's definitely lost its steam, and it looks as though Jay could be OTC number 2, especially since he was one of the most integral parts. He was integral in kicking off the bloodline and all that. You know what I mean? So I think that would be surprised if that was the case. but of course, like I said, as far as that, the thing is misunderstandings. Like I say, a typical, like the tale is always time when it comes to wrestling. Um, but the thing is, it's a trope because, of course, because it works. And so the Usos and LA Knight, definitely have every reason to be on the same team. Just as Jay, LA Knight, and CM Punk did when they all challenged Seth Rollins in that fatal forward for the World Heavyweight Championship at Clash in Paris. But eventually, egos would definitely cause a rift and cause issues, and derail the best interests of everyone involved. And the way that this plays out is to be continued. You know, but it looks like WWE is definitely teasing the idea of the aspect of Jay turning heel. Despite his popularity as one of the top merch sellers in the company, and the thing is, it could be very interesting, or it could be a huge flop. Uh, so only time will tell. And of course, speaking of that, AJ Styles recently on Instagram shared this, shared a graphic, shared this picture of, like I said, of course, AJ Styles, shared a picture on Instagram with an hourglass, with the sand running out, and the sand, had this logo, AJ, phenomenal one, and so it looked like that was hinting at him, getting closer towards retirement, and of course, I'm sorry, of course, AJ clearly, AJ Styles, cut a pretty scathing promo, and there are people who feel as though that was a shot at Triple H. Certainly, AJ's son, felt that way, because feels as though his dad's not being used right, as being underutilized, and everything like that, and so. Could it be that AJ's farewell tour could be right around the corner after Cena wraps his up? Maybe, only time will tell. And the thing is, we could definitely, everyone could see that AJ Styles, is in, the twilight years of his career. He's 48 years old, just like Cena. And of course, we all know that the hourglass is certainly run out on him, and you can definitely see that mileage on his body build up. And so it's just like it's only so many more styles clashes one can really do. And speaking of, AJ Styles defeated Grande Americano with a Styles Clash, and of course also in the other matches, we have Raquel Rodriguez defeat Lyra Valkyria with a pinfall with the Tejana Bomb. And I could definitely see Raquel's improvement in the ring after criticism from Kevin Nash, and looks like it's clearly paying off. You know what I mean? And the thing is, people could say what they want to about Kevin Nash, regards when it comes to his in-ring work. You know what I mean? When it comes to business acumen, people can question certain things. But one thing that they cannot question is how he utilized his strengths more than his weaknesses. So his strength was being a big man. That was, if anything, that was his greatest asset. And so if there's anybody who specializes in that style, besides Undertaker, Big Show, it would be someone like Kevin. So, so the fact that he reached out to Raquel and gave that advice, like I said, gave that advice or constructive criticism, whatever you want to call it, clearly has paid off. And the thing is, Raquel has focused more so on her attributes, what she has going for her as far as her size, rather than running away from that and wrestling in a completely different manner, right? So the fact that she used that as motivation to get better is definitely paying off. So of course, as kudos to Raquel for tapping into that. Then we have of course, also been confirmed um, that there's a mixed tag match between AJ Lee and CM Punk versus Becky Lynch and Seth Rollins at WrestlePalooza. Uh, so on Monday, AJ cut a promo, introduced herself to the fans, went around when she retired 10 years ago. Of course, like I said, AJ mentioned that she had to take some time for mental health and stuff like that. And of course, the fans were sharing that, only to be interrupted by Becky Lynch. And so we saw that AJ was wearing Becky's Intercontinental title. Of course, Lynch told her she could come to, of course, AJ told Lynch that she could come take the title or accept the tag match. And so, of course, Becky accepted. Only Seth Rollins came out to try to assist Becky, and went for CM Punk to come out and interfere, leading to, like I said, leading Seth Rollins accepting the match. Like I said, of course, on behalf of himself and Becky. And then we saw that we also saw backstage, some heat going backstage between Rusev and Penta, only for Adam Pearce to officially, to officially perform the match. As we also saw that Rusev defeated Penta by way of pinfall. We also saw that Asuka defeated Nikki Bella by way of submission with the Asuka lock. Of course, earlier in the night, Asuka told Nikki not to talk to Io Sky, as Bella congratulated Io on the upcoming women's championship match, which led to the bout, to the match that was made later in the night. Of course, the Empress of Tomorrow ends up winning, and we see that that Nikki has made an alliance with Rhea Ripley that was not on my bingo card. You know what I mean? So clearly, WWE is definitely cashing on this nostalgia, if you will. And speaking of nostalgia, NXT had its own share of nostalgia last night. As we're going into, of course, getting closer to Homecoming 2025. And so as far as the matches that were on the show, Dark Sabers Hang a Tank for the tag titles, Fatal Influence versus Sol Ruka and Zarya versus the Culling, the tag title #1 contenders match. Ethan Page versus Tavion Heights, flag match. We have Josh Briggs versus Javon Evans, which kicked off NXT. And we have Laney Reed versus Fabi Apache. Like I said, start off with Josh Briggs versus Javon Evans. Start off with Javon walk through the crowd to the ring, calling out Briggs. Did not waste any time coming out to respond. Evans left out the ring. Wants him to kickstart the brawl. And so, of course, once they got into the ring, Javon nailed the kick, followed by a frog splash for a 2 count. And young OG stayed on his opponent. Didn't let up and kept Briggs on defense until Josh was able to get a few shots to take control. So even with Javon trying to make a comeback, Josh Briggs yanked him off the apron and made sure his face hit pretty hard. Of course, young OG recovered, ended up in a suicide dive. That sent both of them over the announce table. And the thing is, this match never lost any momentum whatsoever. And it goes show that that Javon is definitely one of the more exciting young talents in NXT, and Josh Briggs has grown into being a more reliable and versatile performer. And so it was a great match. Of course, like I said, and Josh Briggs ends up defeating Javon Evans. So of course we also saw that DIY came out to the ring, and Tommaso Ciampa said return to NXT always felt special, especially since this year's a 10-year anniversary of DIY, and of course didn't take long for Trick Williams, the self-proclaimed NXT GOAT, to come out. And of course last week he was taking shots at NXT's past, and of course he's the TNA champion himself, and so. Of course, Carmelo Hayes ended up coming out. I was very surprised, joining Millie. This segment immediately felt like a much bigger deal. If anything, Melo felt like a much bigger deal than he's ever felt like on SmackDown. I was like, oh man, they put Melo back on NXT for right now. So clearly that's for him, to get his momentum back up. I think that's the reason why they made that call. And the thing is, Trick and Melo hadn't had any interaction since Melo, moved up, left NXT and moved to the main roster. And of course, of course, like of course, Melo, gave respect to DIYs and his house they built, and and Melo, done the sort of interior design and decorations, and he called Trick a squatter. I thought, wow, man, that was hilarious. So of course, Trick said it wasn't right that he talked trash about Melo. Also said this was still his house, and of course, Ciampa made a joke, and Melo, had to shut him down. That was his way of saying, like, look, pretty much, that was his way of saying, like, look, they definitely treat it like a family, in a sense that an outsider, can't talk to your family, the way that you can. You know what I mean? So like that's his way of saying, only I can say this stuff about Trick and not you. You know what I mean? And so of course DIY then challenged Trick and Melo to a tag match in No Mercy. But but the segment ended before an answer could even be given. So but of course of course it was great to see Trick and Melo gang reunite at least briefly. And Trick was was definitely getting roasted a little bit. But you also saw that Laney Reed versus Fabi Apache. Laney Reed ends up winning. Then we have Dark State versus Hank and Tank. The winners of this match, Dark State, and of course I will say that I did like that spot. I want to say it was Deion Lennox with a great Arn Anderson spine buster. I said, oh, all right, then you did it the right way too. And Dark State, also ended up winning as well. Of course, actually, I don't think it was Deion. It was more like Cyrus Griffin. As far as that, but then of course Lennox made the mistake of saying Joe Hendry's name. Of course, Hendry ended up coming out, and so during the distraction, Hank and Tank ended up losing with the roll up. Actually, I guess like I said, it was Deion Lennox that definitely hit the double A spine buster. I was like, oh, that was my highlight right there. Then we have Ethan Page versus Tavion Heights in the flag match, and before the match, they showed the Patriot. Back in 1997, of course, back in 1997, waving the United States flag, and Tavion Heights, and we could definitely see that looked like he paid some type of homage to Kurt Angle with his gear. I mean, it's like the 1996 Olympics and stuff, and of course, eventually, like I said, in the end, it was Tavion Heights, representing America to claim the flag and win the match. But unfortunately for him, the North American Championship is not on the line. And so Tyler Breeze showed up and posed next to Ethan Page to end the segment. As Ethan Page was lying down, Tyler Breeze came out and posed next to him to end the segment. So it looks like he could be facing Page next week at Homecoming. Then we have the Culling versus Fatal Influence versus Sol Ruka and Zarya. And the winners of this match, the Culling. And of course, we also saw, of course, Fatal Influence, talking that trash. We saw of course, another, like I said, NXT, comeback, if you will. And as they brought Stephanie Bakir, accompanied by Rhea Ripley and Tiffany Stratton. And I was like, oh, okay, all right, then. Like, if anything, they're looking for, for any way to bring, to add lifeblood to, to the NXT. And so I was like, all right, then, whatever. You know what I mean? But yeah, like I said, this is all for the sake of building up Homecoming. And if anything, I'm certainly for it. But yeah, and matter of fact, there was a meme about the Powerpuff Girls and making them look like Stephanie Bakir, Rhea Ripley, and Tiffany Stratton. And somebody said that WWE's made that meme come to life, and they definitely did. So there's more. So this was definitely a night about NXT's past versus present, and if anything, I'm all for it. But yeah, like I see, those are the main points that I have when it comes to tonight's podcast and when it comes to this week in wrestling. Um, and so before I go, and of course, I like to do birthday shout outs. On September 8th, of course, Lorenz Tate, like I said, rather September 7th, ECE will turn 61 or 62. Anyway, September 8th, Lorenz Tate turns 50. He turned 50 September 8th. Janelle from Jobber Tears turns 36. September 10th, Big Daddy Kane turned 57. September 11th, trifecta of birthdays. Paul Heyman, the GOAT of managers, turned 60. Of course, hip hop legend Ludacris, a fellow hip hop legend Ludacris turns 48. Turns 48. Of course, Taraji P. Henson turns 55. September 13th, Baron Corbin turns 41. September 14th, hip hop legend and icon Nas turns 52. September 15th, Dan Marino turned, NFL legend Dan Marino turned 64. And of course, on September 15th, WWE Hall of Famer legendary manager Teddy Long turns 78. September 17th, gospel legend B.B. Winans turns 63, and Jim Cornette turns 64. And before I go, I will, so of course, before I go, before I go, I'd like to give a word of wisdom. Is that is that you have to have faith that God will supply your needs, and God wants to stir our faith to fight the good fight of faith. And so, and the thing about it is that when you pray, believe that you receive those things, and you will have them. If anything, we walk away after prayer. You have to believe that you receive, that you have received what you have asked for. And the thing is, when you order on God's menu, you can be assured that you will have it. So that's my word of wisdom. And you are victorious because greater is He that is in you than he that is in the world. When you put God in first place, you don't have to worry about being in last place. Of course, please make sure to listen to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere that you download podcasts. Of course, I'm on YouTube, youtube.com/@West Virginia. Please make sure to like, subscribe for more great content. And thank you very much for watching and listening. And may this day be the absolute very best day of your life.